Okay, we're going to begin. Call to order. Do we have a roll call?
All right, one sec. You will take roll. Councilmember Newsma, real quick on your way out. Here. Perfect. Great. Committee Member Livingston. Here. Chair Rikus.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Wynn.
Here.
And then I also know we're having some issues online right now, so hopefully we'll get the Google call back up and running in a second. But I know Leslie was also there, so when that gets reconnected.
Okay, we're going to begin with public comment. And normally we keep it at 3 minutes, but we're going to give you a little longer because you were on the agenda and I know you have a lot to talk about, so.
Yeah, okay. Mine is going to be short. Hi, my name is Celia Carlino. I was Participatory Budgeting Coordinator and currently board member of Open Democracy in Evanston. I am here today to advocate for participatory budgeting in Evanston. In 2022, the city had a brilliant initiative to implement participatory budgeting, first time in Evanston. I would like to inform you how much benefits participatory budgeting brought to our community. First, participatory budgeting connected with different members in our community. 14 years old and up were able to participate. From Ward 1 to Ward 9, people shared 1,300 ideas on how the city should spend $3 million in Evanston. People felt that their voices were heard and considered. Second, participatory budgeting educates members in our community about the city budget. More than 60 budget delegates participate and volunteer and work together for the benefit of their community. People also build a sense of community through the whole process of participatory budgeting. As a participatory budgeting coordinator, that was powerful to see and very inspiring. People are waiting for this kind of opportunity to come forward to do their duty. Finally, participatory budgeting welcomes everyone and meet people where they are, despite their language, their belief, their religion, their ethnicity. Participatory budgeting is the bridge that unites Evanston in a meaningful way. So I'm strongly encourage the city to support this transformative process in Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matt Easterday. I led the Evanston Participatory Budgeting Technical Team. I serve on the board of Open Democracy Evanston, and I'm a professor in the School of Education and Social Policy at Northwestern. So I just wanted to thank you for talking about participatory budgeting and whether it can go into the budget for next year. As you discuss, I hope you will think of participatory budgeting as a way to improve how we make budgeting decisions, not as a separate additional expense. So it's important to recognize that the money that is allocated by PB is used by the city departments to implement projects that are aligned with community needs. So one way to fund PB is by allocating 1% of each department's budget to the PB pot, which would not significantly impact the city budget. Also, the overhead cost of running PB consists mostly of 2 staff members and a small operating budget. And while some have argued that we shouldn't spend the money to allocate money, that's still a 230% lower staff to budget ratio than our current staff to budget ratio for the city. So that suggests it's cheaper to allocate money through PB than our existing.
How much is that money?
For the overhead and the staff is roughly $300,000. And most of that goes to the 2 staff members, and it's about like on the order of like $2 per citizen for the operating budget. And that goes for things like community meetings, budget delegates, and we're happy to talk a lot more about the details of how PB works, if that would be helpful. So practically, we think this is a small cost to allow community members to have a say over really just 1% of their tax dollars, and is a critical step towards a better, more inclusive, more representative democratic government. So thank you.
Thank you. Just a question. How many people were on your committee?
Morgan's going to talk a little bit about that, but there's about 137 community volunteers. So about 50 served as budget delegates. So those are the people that met usually about twice a month to develop proposals. So for 6 months, we had, I might be getting the numbers wrong, is between 50 and 70. Morgan will give you the exact numbers. It's also in the report. So they would meet to develop proposals, get feedback from staff. They went through 4 cycles of vetting to make sure the projects were can be done at the cost they said they were, that they would have impacts on equity and just the outcomes that they thought. So it's also a way to make sure we're doing really transparent and careful policy development. And then we had about that number of volunteers do over 600 hours of canvassing out to the community. So that's why people showed up, is people were going out face to face, convincing their neighbors that this is an important thing to show up for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Brian Nielsen. I've been a resident of Evanston for 44 years. I got interested in the participatory budgeting process or project because of my sort of lifelong interest in civic participation. I had been very isolated. I worked at Northwestern and so on, and didn't have much connection with the city of Evanston. But the process has been very useful in enlightening more people about, what our city is, what our city can do. And the projects that have been voted on really speak to serving citizens of the town. And it's amazing how many people came out to vote for the participatory budgeting process, to vote on the projects. It's quite astounding to me, and I think it has brought greater light to the overall sense of Evanston community development, and I want to see it keep going. We're not the only city that's doing this. There's work in Seattle, there's work in Brooklyn. It's an important social and political development that I hope will show us as a star, this town. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Morgan Wu. I was one of the PB Tech team members. I'm a graduate student in the Learning Science program at Northwestern University and a board member of Open Democracy Evanston. I was born and raised in Taiwan, and I'm truly grateful to be here, witness and be a part of the participatory budgeting process here in Evanston. What stands out to me is that how PB has brought the broader Evanston community together. PB had 137 volunteers and held 128 face-to-face canvassing events. That's more than 600 canvassing hours. In total, volunteers gave the equivalent of more than 3 full-time positions to the city. In addition, PB had 57 active delegates working on proposals and 20 active committee members guiding the process. These represent a 53% increase in participation on Evanston boards, commissions, and committees, which currently have an 18% vacancy rate. These numbers matter because they demonstrate that PB is working to bridge gaps in civic engagement, creating better pathways for involvement and bringing more people into civic decision-making for their community. I'm proud to be part of this important work and look forward to its ongoing efforts in shaping a better community in Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more public comment?
I think we have one online, Mary Rosinski, and then
Hi,
Kimone
thank you.
also. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in a very noisy place, but I know on the agenda there are some items for Parks and Rec. And I just want to say, we haven't talked about that yet, but I know we were trying to get away from spending all that money on consultants and doing more like what Ridgefield does and bring it in. So I'm not speaking for Parks and Rec as officially, but I'm just saying that those numbers we haven't even talked about them. So before budgeting, I'd like to see maybe you guys send it back to Parks and Rec and then discuss it in, and also talk to get ideas from Ridgeville on how they're doing design and build without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay. I think we solved the audio.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kimon also online.
We have another,
Yeah, Kimon, I think.
Yes,
Simone?
hi. Yes, hi, everyone. My name is Kimon Hendricks. I am on tonight to advocate for participatory budgeting and for the city to put participatory budgeting into the 2025 budget. I was a budget delegate, and I'm also on the board of Open Democracy. I believe that participatory budgeting was and will be a way to bring the community together. Last year, when the program was running, we actually made national news. There was a mini story done on it that was put through PBS, and we were, I believe the second in the country to do PB as well. So all of that info combined with that, I believe, speaks volumes. And I also wanted to bring forth to the committee to look a little bit further into where the funds could possibly come from. I know there was a lot of ideas floating around, but one of them is, in particular, is through the community benefits plan that was through Northwestern. I know Northwestern has committed to giving the city $3 million a year. I know so far $1 million of that will be going to housing in Evanston. But, and also please correct me if I'm wrong when you guys start debating, but there is $2 million. And I think that would be an amazing use of funds when it comes to giving back to the community and community benefits agreement between Northwestern and the city and the purpose of the funds and everything that it took to get here. Giving that money back to the community to use in this way, I think is a great use for what it was intended for and speaks volumes. So thanks, everyone.
thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you all, and I know you've given us this, and we have it on our agenda later to discuss, and we appreciate all the comments. It was very enlightening and helpful, and I'm glad it was such a great program for the city of Evanston. So, okay. D1, discussion, which kind of ties in the CIP. Laura, do we have to do a motion?
I thought we were going to move D5 up to the top so they wouldn't have to stay. Were we not?
Well, I think we're going to discuss it later. I don't know.
We're going to have to still stay till the end. I feel like if you were...
I think we have some very important things to discuss relative to the budget, and some of this might relate to areas that participatory budgeting could relate to, but I don't want to lose this meeting.
Okay,
by
I had
moving
just
D5
understood
up.
that we were trying to help them come and hear the discussion and then leave, but
I mean, I don't know what the broader group thinks, but if you want to move D5 up, I'm just concerned that if we start talking about it, that will,
Well-
we really need to give the city guidance on CIP and this parking.
no,
fund.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah,
That's
right.
extremely important. I wonder if we could just limit it so that these folks don't have to stay for an hour until we get to the end.
Okay, let's limit it to about 10 minutes.
Does that, or keep it under 10 minutes? Yeah. We do it under 10-minute discussion? Yeah. Okay.
We're going to stick with the agenda, but we will definitely discuss it, and this is something we'll continue because it's part of our budgeting process, and there's all these pieces that have to come together before we can make a final decision. So we are going to go to D1. Do we need a motion? Oh, it's a discussion. Okay.
I'll move it for discussion.
Second.
Thank you, Clayton. Members of the committee, my name is Laura Biggs. I am the city engineer for Evanston. I'm here to talk about our proposed 2025 CIP that we have assembled. So the first thing I wanted to cover was last year when we came to you, we mentioned that there were a number of very specific challenges that we were struggling with looking at the overall community's capital improvement needs. So I just want to do a really brief update of these things and mention where we are. So the first of these challenges related to funding lead service line replacements and dealing with increased water main replacement needs and the costs that were really was really increasing the cost to the CIP. We had presented a series of proposed water rate increases, which we implemented the first last year in 2024. As a separate agenda item, Darrell King will be discussing moving forward with that, but right now we're on task to begin rolling those projects out.
Is this in our package? I'm sorry.
Yes, it is.
This part is in
Oh, not the presentation?
It's not in here.
No, but the items that are being discussed are in the memo.
Okay. If you could share it, that would be great.
Challenge 2, the need to completely renovate the 11 legacy parks, which had experienced more complete failures, and then just being able to change out individual elements of those. So we identified them. Of the 11 parks, 2 of them are currently in construction now, and we're not as far along as moving forward with the next set of design, but those are budgeted, so we hope to continue with that. Update number 3 had to do with the 6 legacy facilities. These are facilities that have had a lack of capital investment for an extended period of time and are experiencing multiple building system failures. Of the 6, 2 of them are under construction now. When the construction for these are complete later this fall and early next year, they basically will be rehabbed and onto a regular maintenance schedule. 2 of them we developed significant plans for. Those are completed and accepted by City Council, and one to be delayed slightly in its implementation. The other, the service center, we're actually in construction on the first of the projects. We are proposing to budget for a consulting service for the next project next year, and 2 facilities that remain under discussion. So we have made some significant work on those. We continue to budget funding to deal with those issues. Now, as we look forward, we've pulled out some of the significant issues in this year's capital program. Hopefully not so challenging to deal with, but they do present some interesting challenges. So the first of these relates to special assessment alley funding. Special assessment alleys are alleys that are funded through a community cost share where the adjacent property owners pay for 50% of the funding, and the city pays for the remaining share. This is done through a process that's actually regulated and monitored by the state of Illinois law and the Board of Local Improvements. But essentially, the first step in the process is that a community member has an unimproved alley. This is an alley that has a driving surface that's generally made up of recycled asphalt grindings, so similar to gravel, and there's no drainage system. So they come to the city and say, I want my alley improved. The first step is to give them a petition. They're expected to take that petition and get a majority of the adjacent property owners to sign off that they're willing to enter into the special assessment process. We can complete with our current city level funding for the city's cost share, 2 to 3 alleys per year. We currently have 86 people on the wait list to receive a petition. So that demand has grown each year. So 10 years ago, it was 30 people on the wait list, and every year, even with the pandemic, it grows, the recession and everything else still growing. And so when we tell that to people, we get a lot of negative feedback that they can expect to receive a petition in 7 to 9 years from when they sign up for one. So to that end, we're just highlighting it. About 5 years ago, we brought the concern to the city council that the demand was far exceeding the city's funding. At that time, the city council elected to continue with the current level of funding, which has been roughly $500,000 a year. We've worked with the finance.
So 2 alleys are 500,000 a year?
Yeah, the city's share usually covers 2 to 3 alleys. And then we've worked with the finance team we had a reserve that had built up in the special assessment fund. So we've been able to do 1 or 2 additional alleys a year, but that we have burned through.
Just a clarification, the wait list is 86 alleys, not 86 residents.
Well, usually it's 1 resident brings it forward for the alley. So it's 86 residents. But
86 alleys that are waiting
Yes.
to be done.
86 alleys.
Which represent
might have
86
10 or
discrete
12
alleys, yes.
residents on them, but
Yes,
brought
I'm sorry,
forward by
yes.
an alley representative.
Yes.
Leslie, I think you raised your hand. Did you want to ask your question? I don't know. Do you know, Claire, if she had better audio or not?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was hoping that Engineer Biggs could give us a chart or something to that effect on how much has already been spent and how much is budgeted for P&R that was not spent, and is that now considered unassigned funds?
I certainly can answer that question.
Also, as a follow-up, could we get a full chart of how much has already been spent and previously budgeted on these projects, such as the animal shelter, where we are with everything?
So there is a brief chart regarding the facilities that's included in the packet. I can provide you an update on more detailed update on what's been spent on Parks and Rec projects, but I have not prepared that for this meeting. So I would be happy to prepare that for a future.
Yeah, not just Parks and Rec, but all, CIP projects where we are versus, what we were budgeted for.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
So back to alleys. So the finance, working with the finance team, I'm sorry, I got ahead of my slides, but essentially working with the finance team, they are proposing to spend an additional $1 million in reserves, which would help us move another 4 to 6 alleys off of the list. Now, because there's been a gap in time and because not everybody successfully circulates a petition, typically for every 2 to 3 alleys we improve, we move 10 petitions down the list. So this would create like a 30% reduction in the list length if we can if we keep with the same ratio of how many people actually end up getting a successful petition turned in. Then in 2025, we have been pulling together data about how many alleys are improved versus unimproved. We will complete that report, present it, and discuss long-term funding for alleys at potentially a higher level than we currently do. The next challenge I wanted to talk about is sidewalk improvement needs in the downtown area. So we have historically, quite some time ago, decades ago, we converted to a sidewalk standard that was a paver block, which is those brick sidewalks that you see in the downtown area. Over time, we've found those difficult to maintain and keep them ADA compliant because they become uneven. And the effort to maintain them is actually more significant than anticipated. So just discussions with city manager's office and looking at the ADA compliance efforts that the city is putting forth, we are proposing to complete changing out those paver block sidewalks in over a roughly 3 to 5 year period. We have proposed a project to do our first of these paver block projects, which is Benson, Clark to Davis, and Clark, Benson to Sherman's, which would cost us roughly $750,000. There's always a lot of infrastructure, and these are pretty long blocks, a pretty wide sidewalk, so it takes a lot of coordination to complete these. And then we will continue with developing a plan to change out all of the remaining sidewalks, inventory them, and change them out over a period of the next 5 years.
Councilman Kelly, did you have a question?
Thank you. Just a quick question. Are these just listed as in bullet points, or is number 1, number 2 order of priority, like alleys and then sidewalks?
These are just bullet points.
Thank you.
And then challenge number 3, we have debated as a community for quite some time about what to do with Fountain Square. Last night, we did have a discussion about that at City Council, which was basically the general guidance is to move forward with replacing the fountain sort of in kind to what it is now. Staff is actually now going to look at the best methodology for getting that done, including potentially alternate contracting methods and trying to determine our pathway forward, but that would require us to budget funding for next year. And so the current level of funding is merely a construction cost that we estimated based on a change out at the option that actually ended up being recommended by council. It does not include consulting fees, and so we will update all of that over the next couple of weeks and get that into the budget.
Laura, is your budget like 15 million?
So that is an interesting question. Historically, we would budget approximately 12 to 15 million in general obligation debt each year, and then all the other funds, water fund, sewer fund, et cetera, in a way that we were managing the costs of the revenue and the expenses of the fund. This would result in a capital improvement program that was around $50 to $70 million total. With a number of the initiatives that are in place, and because of construction inflation, it is difficult to try to maintain a 12 to $15 million general obligation issue every year. And actually, I would say that while we did that, we tried to keep the actual issuance under $10 million. We would down select as we would get towards the middle of the year. And so one thing that hasn't really happened over the last few years is trying to get to a new appropriate level of general obligation debt. So as you know, we've been working on managing the timing of what we sell for general obligation debt, but in that process, we have not discussed much about what an appropriate level of debt issuance actually is necessary and taking into account necessary to maintain project completions progress. So that is a topic that we could have a discussion on that could be helpful for us in order to determine the best way to move forward.
Can I make a comment? So I think that is the core of our need on a CIP discussion, because the number that you talked about, the 10 to 15 million, that's kind of the number of general obligation debt that rolls off every year that would have already been funded by taxes, property taxes for those GO obligations. And I think that's a good way to think about our capital plan is any decision to spend more than whatever debt is rolling off, and again, on average, maybe it's 12 to 15 or whatever it is, that's a decision to increase the property taxes, in effect, which can be a very good decision. And in fact, when you depending on what the needs are, but that is sort of, we can keep taxes sort of as they are if our capital plan, which we're going to ultimately bond, is about the level of the debt that is getting paid off in that year. Hitesh, would you agree with that comment? And so it seems to me we have to get back to what can we afford to spend, what can we afford to bond, and then prioritize projects. Because one thing that I have found frustrating here is that we talk about projects this is a good one, this, one as one off, when really it needs to be, we think we can afford to spend 15 to 20 or whatever it is, and here's the projects that are the highest priorities for us to allocate that money to. So, to your point, we can't, it seems like they've been coming at us as one-offs, and in terms of a financial practice in a capital-constrained environment, which we are, I don't think that's the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to force a prioritization so we don't spend more than we can afford to.
In addition, we might want to budget 13 million because there's always overruns, there's unexpected things, and we don't, there's an emergency for something, so, we just kind of want to have that little extra if we need it. Councilman Kelly?
Yeah, I was just going to make reference to Clayton did prepare for us a chart of, up to through the year, I think 2028 of maturing of bonds that rolling off, and I think it's hovers around 11 million a year. I'll share that.
So when we talk about bonds, like trying to match the bonds that are rolling off, so that was the level of budget that was sent 20 years ago. So these are bonds that were sold 20 years ago, and we want to roll them off and keep our budget level static. However, 20 years ago, $12 million purchased a very different amount of capital improvement than it does now. Just in the last 3 years, prices have increased maybe 40%. So if we want to do that, that's certainly a reasonable goal to want to set, but then understand that we will be doing 40% less in terms of funding of capital projects than even in what the value we get back than even just 3 years ago. And when we talk about the fact that we have a historic underfunding of parks and facilities, which are the portions of the capital project that are capital program that are funded almost entirely by general obligation bond debt, then we essentially will be continuing with that program unless we identify new sources or a different way of doing things for parks and facilities funding. So 2 or 3 years ago, when this committee was first formed, I came and gave a presentation and described this and said, the number one thing that from a capital point of view we need to do as a community is figure out how to fund parks and facilities improvements. And we have yet to actually determine or even really have a discussion on a different or better way to fund parks and facilities improvements over what we have done the entire time that I've been involved in the capital program, which is 10 years.
Well, there aren't a lot of options, right? I mean, I think that maybe we have 11 rolling off, but we need better clarity about maybe, okay, we're willing to spend, it's up to the council, a bit more, whatever it is. What's the current value of the 11 that's rolling off? That could be 17, right? But whatever, maybe we do have to bond more because of inflation. If 11's rolling off, an equal amount of construction of different projects would be whatever, 15, 17, 20. I mean, the council can do whatever it wants. I just think we need to be much more thoughtful about what can we afford in terms of increasing the tax levy because we need to replace the capital on new projects this year. So whatever it is, it doesn't have to be exactly the same number. It wouldn't be exactly the same number. It can be higher, but the council just needs better visibility of if we spend 17, if we spend 20, this is what it means in terms of higher property taxes, and then we have to prioritize the projects. Another way to fund is to divest things that we don't need and reinvest the money into the things that we do. So that's kind of it. You can sell stuff or you can bond. There's no room in the general fund currently. I think we're going to blow through that in a couple of years, and we have dedicated much more to pensions. So I don't think there's much room in the general fund to fund capital. So it's either going to come from bonding, or it can be supplemented by the fact that are there assets that we could potentially sell to fund projects that are critical to us. I don't think, might be other things, but that's can be the bulk of the options there, I think.
Councilman Kelly, and then let's let Ms. Briggs finish the rest.
Okay. Well, I think it has to be, we have to have some long-term planning, 5, 10 years, non-discretionary expenditures versus discretionary in terms of maintenance and upgrades throughout our parks, our rec, everything. And that should just be a fundamental part of our budget. That's what we need to do. And this shouldn't be something every year, oh my God, we need a new roof, where are we going to get the money? Like, we should be able to scope that out a little bit and have an idea of when we're going to need a new roof, when we're going to need a new HVAC system. Like, that should not be a scramble for funds. We need to plan that out. Those are non-discretionary expenditures. Sidewalk repairs should be non-discretionary. It shouldn't be where are we going to get the money for sidewalk repairs. So that I'd like to see, the regular line items in terms of those sort of expenditures, not, do we need to bond for that? We should be bonding for other things, like non-discretionary items. And I won't,
And I agree too that, like, today, I think we just have the 25 projects, but I think you probably know what's going to come in 26 and 27 and 28, because a lot of these things like the alleys and the sidewalks, they're going to continue every year. So it would be nice if we kind of had a 3-year or 5-year plan.
And, we're spending a lot on slip and falls and suits. This is really like non-discretionary and should absolutely just be a fundamental component of our annual budget. Thank you.
So we are talking about a lot of things like sidewalk improvement has been funded through general obligation debt issuance over the years. So we can definitely consider moving that kind of stuff into the general fund to be paid for on an annual basis, but it's still a cost that just increases the property tax levy. There isn't $1 million to cut out of the general fund to pay for some of these things that we're doing on an annual basis. So that is the challenge that we need to address, and that's definitely something I think that the committee could provide some guidance on, recommendations for doing that.
Yeah, we almost need, like, these are the non-negotiables at the beginning of every year. It's going to cost $3 million or $5 million. And then the other $10 million or $8 million, we prioritize, or the council prioritizes what is going to be needed. Because, I'm just going through some of these charts. It's hard to figure out. But why don't you continue with your presentation, because we keep interrupting you.
So to that end, it's been pretty clear from the city council in the past couple years as we went through all of the stuff that we didn't want to stop projects that were already moving forward, that we'd invested in them and we wanted to keep going. So we divided the list here before we do anything else into projects that have already been ongoing or there's some commitment made versus projects that are new in 2025. And so in the past couple years, we basically come down to a process where we worked with the full city council to talk through criteria to develop those project priorities, which are very similar to what we're discussing right now. And so these are the criteria that we would do all the new projects through. Immediate life safety, they're required by regulatory. So immediate life safety might be something like a fire sprinkler system that needs to be replaced. Regulatory requirements are things like the lead service line replacement program. Annual investments are things like sidewalk improvement programs, and then other projects requiring general obligation bond funding. So some of those things might be things like the kitchen at Levy Center needs to be upgraded. It's old, dated, doesn't meet the needs. So that is the proposal. Certainly willing to hear any feedback, which we've already started, and I really appreciate everything that's been said. Currently, the way that we made the total list is the ongoing projects would require $7.2 million worth of general obligation bonds. The new list of things that have not yet started but does include those items that are an annual investment done every year would be $16.4 million additional. The city does not.
Do we add those two together then? So it's 23 million?
I am happy to add the two, but I will tell you that we do not have the resources. First of all, I recognize we don't have the funding resources, but we don't have the staffing resources as well. So this is the list that we actually need to send through the priorities and bring down. we wanted to wait for feedback, and this discussion's already providing quite a lot of clarity to me, at least for the immediate short term of next steps of what we want to do, which is to next, right away, look at what are we spending on the annual investment type things as a separate pot and look at those separately, and then go through and look at the other items. To that end, I'm happy to do that. Currently, here are sort of our next steps. We did have an initial meeting with Parks and Recreation. We are reviewing it with you guys. We actually plan to also do a discussion with the ADA Advisory Committee and the Environment Board, as they both have really specific interests regarding ADA compliance and CARP compliance. And then this is proposed to go to the City Council on October 14th.
And do we, like the 16 million?
I'm thrilled to hear that we're going to be talking about prioritizing things, but we need to start looking. I just don't think we've ever had a rigorous process for doing that. I mean, and I think a $10 million dog shelter, a $1 million proposed ramp at the dog beach, the overages on Crown are all great examples of that, and then the sort of random purchase of Little Beans. So, I think that there's so much, we need to apply so much more rigor. And if a project starts to look like it's going to overrun, we need to cut it back. And so, yes, David, we can either bond or we can raise taxes, but there's a third, which is applying real rigor to what we spend our money on. And, obviously we have to do sidewalks, we have to do alleyways, but there's a whole bunch of things we don't need to do and that we've allowed the cost to get way out of hand.
So I will tell you right now, to catch up with parks and totally catch up, not just 11 parks, but really just catch up on the parks work that needs to be done. Off the top of my head, that's a $30 million problem. The facilities of 4 legacy facilities that are left to deal with is a $200 million problem. And there is no amount of budgeting and trying to maintain our existing GO bond issuance that deals with that problem that we have.
So Leslie, I think you and I are saying the same thing, that we have to have a clear view on what and prioritize what we want to allocate monies to. I also think, Laura, that the broader group, we do have this sort of special need for these legacy facilities that I think we need to consider separately. Mm-hmm. And how are we going to fund that? How much is it going to be? What potentially are the impact on taxes of doing those every 50-year sort of things? Those are not going to be funded. Hard to imagine we can fund those out of a 15 or whatever $1 million annual budget. But at any rate, it would be great to get from you the sort of sidewalks. What's a general placeholder we could start using for the day-to-day capital? That, to Councilmember Kelly's point, it'd be great to find room in the general fund to be able to do that, but then Hitesh and team are going to have to find offsetting cuts in the general fund to be able to free up general fund money to pay for that. So, because again, we have current reserves, but we're not in an excess annual surplus position in the general fund. So, would be great if 5 million or whatever sidewalks and all that is could just be funded out of current operations. That would be ideal. But I think we also need to then to get to, all right, if you want to do that, these are the cuts that people are going to have to be prepared to do within the general fund to free up $5 million to do that. And so.
Yeah, so that would be great if you could come up with, like we said before, just those expenses that we know are going to be. But like the 16 million here, you mentioned that we might not be able to do all of them because we don't have the staff. Do you have a list of exactly what constitutes that 16 million?
That's included in the packet.
Okay, do you have it on here or?
I don't have
it
up on this presentation. If you wanted to bring up the packet.
I have one more.
Yeah, I have the packet, but I'm having. Do you see what?
We can't see your hands, so you're going to have to let her speak.
Okay. Committee member McMillan?
Hi, I have another question too. Going back and looking through historic budgets, there were allocations to maintaining buildings, maintaining parks. Do we have good records of what was spent? Because it seems like every time I'm turning around, I'm reading in the roundtable, as an example, that we have an $18 million problem now at the library. And, it just seems to me, we need to do a much better job maintaining what we already have. And, I FOIA'd some of those records. I've been told they're not available. And I'm wondering where I would, be able to access that data.
So I'm happy to defer this question to the Director of Administrative Services regarding Council Committee Member McMillan is requesting information on the historic records of facilities maintenance and spending.
And upgrades.
I've been told that they've been lost, so but I'm hoping that that's not true.
Good afternoon, members of the Finance and Budget Committee. Michael Rivera, Interim Administrative Services Director. One of the departments in my purview is Facilities and Fleet Services. And those records, we do have an array of some records. I think what was informed at some point in time, records that might have been lost or not archived was maintenance records. But in terms of financial records and things, records related to services that are performed to the building, yes, we do have records in our 301 system. We receive work orders through our 301 systems, and we have an array of records that we keep from contracted services and companies that come in and do service contracts for us on a regular basis. That we have service contracts with elevators, boiler companies.
Just to clarify, you said we do or we don't have maintenance records.
We do have maintenance.
You just said we don't.
Yes, we do have maintenance records on an array of different things. So I think when you mentioned earlier that you submitted some FOIA requests, so I think if you're submitting or applying for a FOIA request, it needs to be a specific request for something that, something specific that you're researching, and then we can help identify what
So do I
record
need
we
to go
have.
building by building? Is that going to narrow it down enough that my FOIA will be answered?
Yes, that might definitely be critical in identifying building by building and what specific item you're looking for information on.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to also double back, because I also understood, and I did have meetings where I understood that when we changed our software systems, that much of the maintenance records beyond 2 years, both upgrades and maintenance have been
There was some records that were not archived, and there's records that we've been archiving better now. There's also records, like I said, that date back all the way to 2011 when we started with the 301 system, and the 301 system started identifying maintenance as people requested, building by building. So there is an array of different types of records that we do maintain, and there are an array of different type of contracts that we also maintain for different services. We have over 40 plus properties here at the city of Evanston, so there are a significant amount of records. If you are looking for something in specific, I would definitely suggest that it's narrowed down to a site and something specific at that site.
Thank you. I will try again, because I have requested in the past, and I was told that
Okay.
we didn't have them. So
Happy to assist with that. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. And Laura, I just have a comment or question. So thank you for this list. It's great. Can you highlight maybe for our next meeting which ones you think will be able to be done in 25 and which ones won't? Because it looks like there's a big list here. And then how do we prioritize? Is it something you'll go to Parks and Rec and you discuss with them? How are these decided which projects are priorities?
So the first step is to look at those 4 criteria that I provided and run them through that. Now, there are always situations where I'm speaking to Parks and Rec Board or even to City Council and somebody says, hey, I realize you've done this list, but this thing, so we'll just pick on pickleball. We always use that as an example. While it doesn't necessarily seem, if you run it through these criteria, that's the most important thing that we're doing, there's a large community demand for it that isn't necessarily captured by running through objective criteria. So there may be things that occasionally get pulled out of that list or highlighted beyond what the criteria think. But the criteria are very useful for providing clarity on if you have a list of 100 projects and you want to try to understand the 20 or 30 that are really critical, going through that sort of evaluation can really help identify what's most important to move forward with. So we've done that type of analysis the last 2 to 3 years with the city council. I'm going to be doing it, so I'm certainly happy to do that and bring that back here as well.
Yeah, and I do see like the fountain says $1.7 million. That might have to change once you get all the pricing. What? Oh, we got 800. Okay.
So we have 800,000,
Okay.
and then the estimate that we have is $2.5 million.
Okay.
So, but we want to look at the best way to move forward with that, with respecting the guidance that we got from the city council to basically recreate the fountain in kind.
Okay, this was very helpful. And I think, just to recap, maybe you can come back next month or the month after, but to have, the kind of the set expenses. And I would like to maybe see a 2 to 3 year plan over time.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think in summary, too, we need what's your base number of the whatever the year-to-year repair is? What's that? Hitesh can then identify, is there any possible way? What are the options? There is a possible way. What would we have to cut out of the general fund to fund that out of current operations? And then separately, the council needs to determine to what degree are they willing to bond more than the retiring debt, which will be incremental property taxes, to fund capital needs beyond that base level. And if Hitesh and team can't identify general fund cuts, then that needs to go into the bonding as well. But it's sort of, council needs to supply the constraint, and then maybe with participatory budgeting or whomever, you then fill up the bucket of what's available beyond this maybe $5 million number that could be the year-to-year recurring stuff that ideally we'd like to have in the general fund. If we can't, then there's no option but to bond it. But council needs to say, you can spend up to X. And then we have, like Leslie was saying, do a much better job of actually then picking the projects with some degree of contingency, because we know something that's a true emergency will come up, and live within that budget. And we've got to get away from this. New stuff comes up and it's a great idea and we need to do it anyway. No, that needs to stop. It needs to be, we can spend up to X, a little bit of contingency in there. If something good comes up, we got to roll into next year. Unless separately the council decides, well, we'll do that, and it's going to clearly mean more incremental taxes. So council needs to supply the constraint, and then you need to prioritize within that constraint, what can we afford to do?
Yeah, and I've thought of this, but I love your criteria, but, like how we have a budget expense policy and a pension policy, maybe we can come up with a CIP policy where it starts top down. What is the amount that we're willing to bond? What's the criteria, the process? So that's something we could probably work with you on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all your work. I know that was a lot of work, so thanks. Okay, D2, discussion regarding the needs of the parking fund. I know this ties into CIP also.
Good evening. My name is Christian Salvador. It's my first time up here. Been with the city now for 1 year. Just wanted to formally introduce myself. I'm with the Administrative Services, and I'm the Management Analyst. So I'll be speaking on these subject matters that we are that you're inquiring about. So just to start, did you just want me to summarize, Mike? Just basically go through each one and kind of, okay. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is our park systems. The park systems is basically our parking access revenue control system. That's what we utilize in our garages throughout the city. And that's what we use for, basically for the revenue control itself. This system has been installed in 2015 for approximately $1.3 million. And the average lifespan of this revenue control system is approximately 5 to 8 years. The equipment currently in place is no longer under warranty, and so therefore the city of Evanston is incurring the costs for any type of maintenance that needs to be performed. Since 2023, since the beginning of 2023, we've been invoiced over $200,000. And we don't foresee those numbers going down just because the system continues to age. In addition to that, we have a vendor that actually services it by the name of Skidata, and it basically, they now have a footprint in the Chicago metro area. This causes actually longer lead times for parts and less reliable services. And in 2015, that was a different situation. Skidata was much larger at the time. They've basically limited their services here. So, in addition to that, the current system in place, it lacks functionality as well as the ability to upgrade to today's world, to today's technology. And in addition to that, Skidata has not actually pushed any hardware software upgrades, or if last case scenario, they only did upgrade the components by the time they failed. So that's not really a productive manner to counteract the issues that we're facing. In addition to that, we would like to focus on getting more involved into like hotel validations, and this current system we have in place doesn't do that. In addition to that, we have no ability to integrate scanning barcodes or QR codes. For example, during our holiday promotion that we had last year where we're offering the free parking, we had to print out the cards, kind of goes against our sustainability efforts. So this kind of system, we can kind of upgrade, kind of streamline the process. And we can also work with like other vendors such as Spot Hero, online reservation systems, as well as other sales platforms that might exist throughout the community. Obviously, we do expect an increased usage. The usage of the garages and the existing park system is expected to increase over the coming months and years, obviously. I do want to note that I understand that the city is kind of focusing on the sustainability efforts for bicycle paths, for example. There was an article yesterday that was released where we're going to probably lose like 100 spaces. So with this system, that will actually help us with the initiative of getting more people parking into the garages while still maintaining our sustainability efforts. In addition to that, we do have we have new garage tenants and developments that are coming online that's going to actually bring increased traffic to the current parking garages. We've got the Lifetime Fitness at the Sherman Garage that's coming online in 2024. That's going to be hundreds of new daily users, obviously. Obviously, the Civic Center move to 909 Davis, that's going to affect us as well. The system will be integrated for the employees who will be parking at the Maple Garage. Visitors will park at the Sherman Garage as well, just FYI. As far as residential developments with limited parking, current systems in place is not integrated with our system. There was a special deal done with the condo association for one of our garages, and they have their separate system. We need to upgrade our system to kind of match that system within the garage itself, if that makes sense. So in addition to that, we want to continue the efforts on revitalizing the downtown area and continue helping with the recovery of the Metro and CTA ridership. Obviously, riders park at the Sherman Garage and take the trains into Chicago itself. So that's another source there. And then in addition to that, I would like to kind of go over the benefits with regards to enhancing this new system. There are a variety of improvements and potential cost savings that come with this new park system. For one, we're going to have less service calls, obviously. Right now, we're averaging about $10,000 a month alone just on service calls for this archaic system. Again, I did a little bit of research over the past 18 months. We're talking average $10,000 a month alone, and we're only expecting those numbers to increase. We're also going to focus on the new system will also be a dedicated cloud-based server at each garage. Unfortunately, right now, our system is set up to where we have a headquarters in one of our garages, so the other two garages are intertwined with that headquarter garage. And now if we move forward with this, we can kind of separate the three, and it kind of just helps us streamline the process itself when we're looking at revenue numbers and performance metrics, based on the garage itself. So, but one of the main functionalities, again, that we're trying to focus on is just the potential for having the ability for implementing QR and barcode scanners. So we can also like focus on online reservations, even special events during downtown events, maybe even snow emergency functionalities where up to the minute we need to let the citizens know, hey, that maybe there's a special, for example, or we want to engage somebody because if there's some type, we want to engage the citizens for special events and let them know that they have parking options. And again, this system will assist us with that as well. In addition to that, there's also a benefit for EPD and the citizens themselves. This new system that we're trying to get, that we need to get, basically will also help EPD with the stolen vehicle database. So we're going to be able to track, not necessarily track, but we're going to be able to receive like hits, let's say on a stolen license plate, and we could notify EPD and maybe recover a vehicle. In addition to that, the parking enforcement LPRs, they will also have a better system designed to basically track any type of scofflaws and any type of violations. And last but not least, again, this will affect us for 909 Davis facility. All the employees here will get the HID access cards, and only one badge will be needed to access the garages for the 909 Davis facility. Okay. All right. My apologies here. Okay, that's the existing. Okay. I think that pretty much covers it with regards to that main aspect. Did you want me to continue to the next line, or did you guys have questions?
I think maybe if I get Hitesh, does the parking fund have, first of all, is the parking fund operating in a surplus at its today?
It says here that they're expecting 1 million in surplus.
Yeah, okay. And is there surplus reserves in the parking fund? On an annual basis, is it operating in the black? And do we have the funds in the parking fund today to execute these projects?
Yes, good evening, it is Desai. Yes, it is operating as a surplus, but they have some CIP needs, for which I think the ended 23 with around a little over 2 million in fund balance. And they might add to that in 24 some surplus. So that's a good sign that, operationally they are profitable, or at least a surplus. But I think they have almost, $2.5 million in the capital needs.
So I'm confused. Why are we budgeting for $2 million then?
What's the question?
So I think the question is
why are we doing 2.6 million in CIP? It says staff recommends using $1 million excess parking reserve and GO bonds to pay the future projects. Is that right? So it's really 1.6?
I mean, parking unaudited 2.8 million right there. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, 16, which is a 1.57. Projects in parking fund, with ending 24, at least 1 million in excess reserve that could be used towards this. Yes. Now, again, I don't know what is their requirement in 25 and 26, but they can, we gave them the direction that they could use up to $1 million out of the fund balance.
And this is in your budget too, right?
So again, I'm still somewhat confused. Is there not available money in the reserves today to execute these projects? I would assume you make the assessment, these are the most, like the discussion we just had, these are the most important projects to do, sounds like. We're, not in a position to argue. It sounds like absolutely on the gate system and all those improvements. It's just a matter of how does it get funded and how much is already available in the parking fund. Why do we have to go beyond it?
Right. So
is the question.
Is it the policy, if you look at the budget policies, again, like general fund, 16.66. So excess reserve is around $1 million. If we take out that budgetary policy, the last few lines of the first paragraph. So that's why we have $1 million. Yeah, we cannot just bring it down to the zero,
I'm sorry, that's $1 million in addition to the budgeted 16.6, which is 1.57. So there's this is $1 million above and beyond the reserve.
Right, so that they could use towards the CIP project, $1 million.
So there's 1.8 that needs to go to the CIP.
Correct.
1.8 would need to be bonded, is what you're saying, to do these, as opposed to maybe going below our reserve requirement for a year or two and have that build back up through
And
operations.
hopefully we'll have more revenue with some of these
They
other,
could, but right now, it looks like considering the 2 months of budgetary policy, the fund balance policy, they can use $1 million of the existing fund balance plus any other needs, could come out of the bond.
Madam Chair, I just want to note that my hand is raised.
and then Councilmember Reed, and then Councilmember Kelly.
Apologies for ducking out and dealing with a constituent emergency. I'll catch up and then I'll hold my questions for later.
And I just want to state that all of these projects would appear in the capital improvement program. It's merely how they are funded, whether it is parking fund or general reserve transfer, or however that we might change. But the size and complexity of the projects is such that they would appear in the capital program.
Okay, Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, I just want to note one thing. While the parking fund may seem, let's say, some version of healthy, we should be making larger transfers out of the parking fund into the general fund, or really into the CIP, because our parking fund should be supporting our more of our infrastructure needs, more of our roads, because our roads are wider, because we have to provide parking. As noted, our garages could use a lot of improvements, the systems within our garages. So I really think one of the things we need to think about is how can we more effectively utilize our parking system to cover more of our infrastructure needs. And so while, again, it may seem like the fund is doing all right, there's a lot more that we should be getting out of it. And it's actually, in my opinion, and I think maybe some staff would agree with this, it's one of the largest subsidies that we give to residents by giving away parking either for free or at a cost that is far below what it takes to maintain the system.
If I can jump in real quick, I do want to make a note here as well with regards to the revenue itself. We haven't increased our rates for years. That's something that we're looking at as well, and we believe that's something that we need to look at specifically. If we take a look at expired meter citations, for example, the current fine is $25. Skokie and Chicago charge $50. Just a simple $10 increase would result in approximately $200,000 in new revenue. I just wanted to make that.
Thank you.
Okay.
We just have one or two more questions. We have a lot on the agenda, so we're going to move to the next point. Councilman Kelly, did you?
How much do we transfer annually? Is it a fixed amount to the general fund from parking?
It's $2.9 million.
That's what we've been doing for multiple years, just $2.9 million. Okay.
So, Member Newsman?
I think we.
Did you have something?
Yeah, are we looking for this committee to give feedback on these proposed revenue increases?
I think it was discussion, but we can talk about it. I mean,
Okay, well, I'll just run through and give my opinion, speaking on behalf of myself as representative of the Fourth Ward residents. Idea number one, increasing the various parking citation fines. Not super thrilled about that. I can't imagine any council members would be super thrilled about that. We'd be accused of nickel and diming Evanston residents. On the other hand, increasing the fees for surface lot and on-street parking, I think that would be appropriate if we haven't increased those fees in at least 10 years, if I'm reading this correctly. 6 years for the surface lots and 10 years for the residential permits. So I think that would be a small increase there would be appropriate. The next idea, live street cleaning tickets, to issue real tickets rather than warnings, starting in March. That's, we would get a lot of calls about that, I'm sure, as well. So I'm not super thrilled about that. Pass-through credit card fees on parking, I think that's reasonable. One way or another, those fees have to be paid. And then increasing the meter rates on the lakefront, not super thrilled about that one.
How's the committee feel about these improvements that need to be made?
I think the improvements are fine, but we shouldn't be issuing GO debt for them. It needs to be funded within the parking fund. So if you need to increase revenue to do it, but I would say all of these look like they're reasonable priorities, but I don't think they should be part of a GO bond. They should be part of the they should be funded by the operations of parking.
And we don't, this is 1 million estimated excess reserves.
Correct,
It might
the
come
1
in
million.
higher.
Correct.
It could be much higher.
Does that million excess reserve factor in the additional revenue from the Lifetime Fitness?
That's a good question. I will let you answer.
The $1 million is as of the 23 audit number, the excess balance.
All right. So
But any ever, or whatever you approve here, the city council approves any of these revenue enhancements, that would bring in additional money, plus any surplus we generate in 24.
But back to the Lifetime Fitness, I recall signing some kind of agreement with them where they're on the hook for paying us for parking. How much is that going to be?
Hello, Mike Rivera again. The lifetime contract, the contract with Lifetime Fitness is for $264,000 a year. That contract goes into effect. We've already executed the contract on behalf of the city and Lifetime Fitness. That will go into effect once they procure a business license and they start operation.
But that's 264 guaranteed.
It'll be $264,000 per year. That's correct. So approximately $22,000 per month. We'll start collecting as soon as they obtain a business license and they start conducting business.
Worth noting.
Yeah.
That's a pretty significant bump.
Yeah. So our estimate for Lifetime Fitness coming in line is probably sometime April, May of 2025.
Okay.
So we should collect the better of 7 months of revenue at $22,000 a month for 20.
Okay, we need to move on to the next item, but as far as all these increases, is that something going to be discussed at City Council?
It will, but I think, I feel like we're all saying pretty much that it looks like between excess and other potential new funding, we wouldn't be advocating for additional, for bonding or.
Yeah, with regards to some of the items that we noted as far as new revenue generating mechanisms, like raising fees at the lakefront, we currently have as a public benefit, if you have a paid wheel tax and you're an Evanston resident, you don't pay for fees at the lakefront. So raising a fee at the lakefront wouldn't adversely impact an Evanston resident. It would impact visitors that are coming to Evanston. They would pay the higher fees versus the residents, as well as some of the permits that was discussed. We have some permits that have been raised in 10 years. We have residential parking districts are $30 a year per vehicle. So basically, a cup of coffee is your permit for the month, $2.50 for that. They haven't been raised in quite some time. So a collection of all these fees being increased would probably significantly raise somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000 a year. So that's something, if this committee would like for us to take to APNW for a broader discussion, that's something that we're happy to compile and take to APNW.
Yeah, I think we should. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item.
Well, I just want to say, I think there's a few items that we might be unanimous, like the pass-through credit card fees. I think we all could give direction to move forward with that, right? I mean, that's maybe $500,000, right? Yeah. I mean, just so that's stated here. I mean, even if, I think we're all unanimously
And
support
Councilman
that.
Newsman, you rattled a few things off too that I think we were all in agreement.
But I think that's one area that we all agree on that we should, that would be a change, that we'd be directing staff to.
It still would have to come to the council.
Right, but just so that comes with I think it would be nice if it came with a recommendation from Finance and Budget.
I think we've discussed this. I want to move on to the next item, which is our discussion, the water and sewer rates.
Chair Rikis, members of the Finance and Budget Committee, Darrell King, Water Production Bureau Chief. I'm here tonight to give you an update on the water fund with regards to rates. Okay, so there are several factors that's placing a burden on the water fund, which are related to the distribution system. Projects at the water plant are there is major assistance with our contracts with our wholesale customers. So the stress that's being put on the water fund are distribution system commitments or demands. Cost of water main and lead service line replacements must be borne by Evanston retail customers, and that's because 99% of the water main in our distribution system are 18 inches or smaller. Those are the mains that the lead service lines are connected to. Our wholesale customers don't utilize those water mains, and so that burden is on the Evanston retail ratepayers, as well as the Lead Service Line Notification Replacement and Notification Act prohibits those fees from being passed on to wholesale customers. The need to replace aging water mains. Last year, we established to increase from 1.5 miles a year up to 3.2 miles a year, so that by 2042, we won't have 27, 30 miles of water main that's 121 years of age or older. Water main typically has a life of 100, 120 years. The need to replace lead service lines as part of water main projects, and the need to replace all 10,000 plus lead service lines between 2027 and 2047, and the increased costs of water main construction, which we saw an increase of 41% since 2020 or so. That price, that increase has continued to go up. So one thing that I will note here, what I'm getting ready to show you, is based solely on the requirement of the Lead Service Line Notification Replacement and Notification Act that's enacted in Illinois as of January 1 of 2022. Currently brewing on the federal level is the lead and copper rule improvements, which is expected to be finalized next month on the 16th. So with our current Illinois law, 2047 is the date, starting in 2027, where all the lead service lines would have to be replaced. With this federal lead and copper rule improvements, that 20 years could be reduced down to 10 years. And so this is only considering 20 years. And so we established goals, water fund goals last year: maintain a minimum balance of 5.8 million, keep debt service associated with the distribution system to less than 25% of the operating capital, maintain a water treatment plant in good operating condition, replace or rehabilitate 3.2 miles of water distribution system annually, and replace 500 lead service lines each year beginning in 2027. Since the enactment of the Illinois law in 2022, we have replaced 551 lead service lines so far. So those replacements are happening. And so this was a table provided last year where we showed, 2024, what we thought we needed in bonding, what the proposed increase was for lead service line replacements. There was a 4% previously scheduled increase that was connected to hiring 7 full-time employees to replace lead service lines. This was the second year of that increase. It was a total of 9%, 5% in 2023, 4% in 24. So that's how we wound up at the 17.5% last year. This year, we're showing additional bonding, a 13.5% increase. Before the requirement to replace lead service lines happened, before we decided to double the water mains, we had already anticipated a 9.8% reduction increase, and that's how we ended up at the 23.3%. At that time, we had also anticipated offsetting that 9.8% with a 9.8% decrease in the sewer fund to help out with the total combined water and sewer rate, and we'll talk more about that. So it should be noted, future increases are
Can
anticipated.
we go back, and why does it go to zero? Because you haven't decided the increases, or?
So based on what we've looked at, the previously scheduled rate increases, there were none. After that 9.8%, there weren't any additional previously proposed increases in the water fund following.
But there may be.
All of this is subject to change, but just, what we're anticipating and what we've looked at, that's what we laid out last year.
That previously scheduled rate increase, those numbers were superseded by, like 4.0 was superseded by 13.
Correct. They were pre-existing of what we were anticipating. Well, the 4% had already been approved with the lead service line full-time positions. The 9.8% had not already been pre-approved. We were just anticipating that. And so, we're anticipating future increases to follow what was proposed in 24, but we reevaluate it every year. And so we did follow through on reevaluating our cost of service models. For 2025, we came up with 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 is a 0% rate increase, full 4.1 million transferred to the general fund. That scenario wasn't recommended, and I'll demonstrate that to you. Scenario 2, 23.3 rate increase, full 4.1 million transferred to the general fund. A 13.5% sewer decrease. That one was originally 9.8%, but as we reevaluated things, we saw that we could do more, and so that's where that came from. That's the recommended one. And then scenario 3 is 10.54% rate increase, which would be a net zero, but it includes a $2 million reduction to the transfer to the general fund, as well as a 13.5 sewer decrease. So it would be a net zero increase if that was the one, and that one was not recommended, and we'll talk more about that. And so if we do nothing, we don't increase the rates, this is what we see happening to the water fund. The red line, dotted line, that's the minimum reserve, 5.8 million. And then as you see in 2024, as we go down through 2030, that reserve level just drops out. And that's with the 0% rate increase, continuing with the $4.1 million transfer to the general fund. And so scenario 2, we're anticipating the 23.3 increase. However, the sewer rate reduction, as I stated, was originally 9.8%. We increased that to 13.5%, which offsets a greater part of the increase. This results in a net increase to the combined water sewer rate of 7.15%. And I'll show you that in a table. This reflects the continuation of the annual transfer from the water fund to the general fund of 4.1 million. And community members who qualify for the affordable rate, water and sewer rate, there are currently 606 participants, 243 owners that receive the rates, and then 663 renters that we send an annual payment to offset the increase. So that won't be impacted, anybody that's on those. And just to note, our original goal for participants in that program was 600. And it started off extremely slow, but it's built up, and we had to kind of reimagine it in order to get the numbers up. But we've reached that initial goal of 600. The affordable rate, it'll be reviewed every 3 years. And so this is what that projection looks like. Scenario 2, 23.3% increase, full transfer to the general fund. And now those cash reserve levels, they start to go back up closer to that minimum reserve of 5.8 million.
Isn't it 23.3 less the sewer credit, or is it really up 23.3? I thought it was up 13 something net of the sewer.
So, who asked that question? So the 23.3 million, the 23.3% is 13.5% due to lead service line replacements, doubling the water main, things of that nature, plus the previously scheduled 9.8% increase, which we had already anticipated before any of this stuff happened. So that's how we got to 23.3%.
And there's no way to spread that 9% out over 26, 27, 28, so it's not such a large increase?
You're talking about the 9.8%?
Yeah.
So we looked at different scenarios, and here's something else that this is tied to. Anytime we borrow money from the Illinois EPA, the state revolving fund, these are low interest loans, less than 2%, some of which may qualify for principal debt forgiveness. We have to prove to EPA each year that we're receiving those funds, that we can afford to pay back the loan, even if we end up getting principal debt forgiveness. So when we're going through these exercises, we're trying to maintain a healthy water fund, because IEPA actually request proof, ordinances, council actions that, hey, these increases have actually gone into effect. And so spreading out the rate increases over multiple years has an impact on what that water fund, what it looks like, what it ends up. Is it healthy? Is it not? Are things bottoming out? And we try to prevent it from doing that, because if you do that, it could cause a higher increase later.
Okay.
Even.
Councilman Kelly?
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with spreading out, only because more funds, both state and federal grants, continue to become available. And I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit, not about the IEPA low interest or the other loans that are, but if you could talk to us about grants that we've.
So we're currently using granted dollars with ARPA. We're using $2 million of that for this type of work. Of course, last night, City Council talked about the $1 million grant from the Department of Commerce Economic Opportunity. So we're using that, and then we're earmarked. We haven't gotten it yet. So for this 5-year SRF, State Revolving Fund program, we were approved 5-year program, $25 million, $5 million each year. We're earmarked for 2025 to receive $3 million in principal debt forgiveness. We haven't gotten that. That's not a guarantee, but on the intended funded list, it's showing Evanston could get that. We're earmarked for that. And all of that has been factored into what I'm showing you too. I didn't leave it out. So we are actively looking at opportunities where grant money and things of that nature is available, and we're we're enjoying and taking advantage of some of it already.
Great.
And so that's the newest amount that we're earmarked for. So
Okay.
we haven't gotten it. They haven't officially awarded it, but
Yeah, I mean, I know Illinois
out there.
earmarks over 55, a lot as well as the federal government. I'd love to see a sort of breakdown of that grant money that we're receiving, both state and federal, annually. Not tonight, but if you could.
so we're not receiving, well, ARPA, I guess, is federal.
Not, but money that's explicitly earmarked, dedicated for the lead pipe replacement.
So for now, we're looking at 3, 2, 5, 6 million. Is that
I'm
6
sorry?
million?
6 million a year?
So ARPA, not a year. I'm just talking about
Total money. That's the total, including, but yeah, I'm not even referencing ARPA, from state and federal grants that are dedicated for these projects.
So state principal forgiveness, 3 million,
Okay,
where we're earmarked for. We haven't received it yet.
understood.
And then $1 million, we've received that from the Department of Commerce Economic Opportunity. So far from the state, $4 million that we're anticipating. And then, so for that 5-year project, so that 3 million principal forgiveness that we're earmarked for, that's just for 2025. We could qualify for principal forgiveness each year of the 5 years. But that's what I can tell you now
Okay.
from the state level. Nothing to report on the federal level other than ARPA.
And Hitesh, you agree with, I think, scenario 2, scenario 2?
I mean, yes, we try to kind of keep it neutral as much as possible, and I think that Daryl touched on this kind of pretty much same presentation and gave the things. I mean, he has a huge, I think, CIP needs in the coming years. So obviously, yeah, we'll have to keep the water fund afloat, you know, and that's why it makes sense. And obviously, he's doing a big reduction in the sewer fund of almost 14% or 13%.
So it's 23.3 minus the 13.5, so it's net 7.15?
Yes.
Okay. And do you want us to make a recommendation, or are you bringing it to city council?
I mean, we could bring it to the city council or the next finance and budget committee as an action item, or
Action item.
recommendation.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I do have a question about the sewer fund decrease. Let me understand what's driving that decrease.
What's driving the decrease is to offset what's proposed in the water fund to lessen the blow and to
Lessen the blow to the customers, to the ratepayer.
yes
To the
yes.
ratepayer.
So originally the goal was to do a revenue neutral net zero to where it wouldn't impact.
Yeah.
We raise the water, we lower the sewer down enough to where it would be the same.
And I appreciate that instinct. Sooner or later, we're going to have to pay for stuff.
Right.
And maybe 10 years sooner, depending on what happens in Washington next month. So to me, it kind of fundamentally comes down to, do we pay for the lead service lines through water rates, water and sewer rates, or do we pay for it through taxes? And I would prefer the former. Because there are more folks who use water and sewer in Evanston than pay property taxes in Evanston. And so they just want to offer that kind of general guidance.
For sure. You don't want to use property taxes
Right,
for something that can be spread across all.
Exactly.
all
And we're not proposing to use property taxes.
No, exactly.
Exactly.
But if we do something like reduce the transfer to the general fund, in effect, that eventually becomes a property tax increase.
Exactly.
Right, as those reserves come out. So I think this is, and so part of the problem we got into was because for years, the combined rate was held constant. A long time, like 15 or something. So a long time, that was just not, you know, that's when we fell behind on our maintenance. We should have been doing more then, but there was a desire to keep the overall rate flat, and now you've ramped up the spending, and we have the very valid real need of replacing the lead service lines. So the rates should go up.
And I
They
think a
should go.
lot of that played into the sewer fund because the city invested over $200 million in the sewer fund. So that water fund was held for years in order to lessen the impact in that way. But now a lot of the sewer fund from that project or multiple projects, that's starting to retire off. But now we're faced with a potentially $238 million for lead service replacements, not to mention now we're doubling the water main. So doubling the water main, you know, now we're looking at $15 million a year where it was half of that before that. So
Well, thank you. We're going to move on to the next agenda, but you'll bring an action item, but I think 2040 is going to be good. The pension, we're going to have the sewers all up to date. It's going to be a good year, so. What? Okay, we are going to move to the ARPA. Yeah. Yeah, and if you can kind of go quickly, because we all got this in
Well, actually, I didn't prepare a presentation.
Oh,
I
great.
figured it was
Okay.
just for information, and I'm happy to answer questions. Seems reasonable.
One quick question. We have made some interest on our ARPA money that is in our accounts. Where does that show up? Not on
It
this
doesn't
report.
show up in our ARPA because we don't have to treat it as ARPA. We have been using that outside of that.
That was my
with-
second question. The interest isn't encumbered in the way that ARPA is.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
But bottom up, we don't have any issues with unallocated funds. You've resolved that a good job. And so I think that was really why we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, we just
about
didn't want to
this.
lose any money, so that was.
Neither do I want us
Yes,
to
of
lose
course
money.
not, of course not.
Of course not. But it's complex and the rules kept changing, so good
Yes.
job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions for Sarah? Okay, we're going to finish with the participatory budgeting, and thank you all for staying. And I think that you got a flavor of our committee here. There is a lot of needs in this community and a lot of things pulling from the budget. So I'll open it up for discussion here.
Is there going to be a presentation or what?
Oh, well, they talked a lot.
Oh, the participatory, okay, I'm happy with it.
Okay.
Sure. So, I'm very, I feel very supportive of this. I wasn't initially when it was first proposed a couple of years ago, but seeing the really amazing participation, community participation, I think as one resident who spoke this evening mentioned, the civic participation is just so impressive with this group. I feel like the amount that we allocate for the staffing of it is reasonable, given that, like I said, their ability to really pull in the community, to educate the community. I think this is well worth it. I think it is, for this amount of money, I think this group has done a wonderful job of educating our community and in making them feel more connected to our city. So I'd like to see us move forward with continued program. And again, I just think it really is a good bang for our buck.
Committee member McMillan and then committee member Livingston.
I mean, I guess I still have some concerns just because I feel like some of the funds, as an example, I think in 2022, 750,000 went to Northwestern to help kids go visit colleges. I mean, we have, Evanston scholars for that. So, I think, I think it's a nice luxury, but I don't think we have the benefit of a luxury right now. I think we're, looking at an enormous amount that we need to spend on our buildings. So I'm not a big fan. But
Committee member Livingston?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have an incremental $4 million in the general fund. I think maybe we can think about what's the area that's most complex where maybe we could solicit more input, and it could be in the area of this capital planning, right? Of what are the priorities of the community relative to after we get whatever the number is, right? The 5 million of sidewalks and wherever. But when it gets into prioritization of The rest, it would probably be good for council to get really solid input of, this is what the community thinks about how the incremental 10 or 15 or whatever it is would get spent. That could be a focused area that maybe is not incremental spending, of where participatory budgeting could have, maybe not the same say as this once in a lifetime large ARPA injection of money, but we do have absolutely a need to prioritize on the capital side. So that would be my thought.
Councilmember Newsome?
I think my thoughts are kind of in alignment with Mr. Livingston's. I really appreciate participatory budgeting for the lessons that we've been able to learn from outreach and engagement. It was a really effective way of being able to do that. But if I had $300,000 to spend, I would, and I had to spend that money, and it couldn't be on sidewalks, it couldn't be on lead service lines, it couldn't be on alleys, it had to be on something related to this. I would rather spend that on outreach and engagement kind of more broadly, which might include participatory budgeting, but we also do outreach and engagement all the time on other things like developments and Envision Evanston. We have some community engagement in the works for our Civic Center discussion. And so the lessons that we've learned from participatory budgeting are ones I would like to apply in those cases. But what it boils down to for me is the process as we have been through it is really just not an efficient way of allocating the city's financial resources, knowing that there are all these major expenses looming for decades. We're not lacking in ideas for how to spend the money. We don't need help coming up with ideas. We've got more needs than we have money. And that problem is going to get worse, let me point out, when the grocery tax goes away and when the federal government cuts our timeline in half for replacing the lead service lines.
And pensions are $5 million higher from the last meeting, right? So we have a $7.5 million built-in hole in the general fund already.
It's going to be increasingly difficult for council, or maybe not all council members, but at least for me, to approve money on nice-to-have projects when we have all of these must-haves. But I do want to acknowledge the good work that this team has done, and the outreach and engagement is what I would like to take away from this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Kelly.
Thank you. So I also agree with David. I think in terms of the work that the participatory budgeting team does in terms of helping to prioritize and bring that to our attention, I think is so important. I think the more projects are vetted, the more likely we are to spend more appropriately. And I think this is, in a way, they kind of serve as the checks and balances for us to have this. I think it's not a huge sum of money. We spend lots of money outsourcing to consultants to do outreach, and I think they've done the best job at, $300,000. I don't think it's a lot, and I think they could help I think it's about discussing how it would move forward in terms of helping to provide that sort of prioritization from the public. I think that outreach, again, can help us, provide, again, sort of a checks and balances to make sure that we're really listening and tuning into the public to make sure we are, in fact, spending in a way that does reflect our community's priorities. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. And I also agree with Mr. Livingston that, we do have a lot of needs and we have to see what our budget's going to look like and see if it's something that we can put through the budget. But I also want to thank this committee because I didn't know all this work that you've done, and it's amazing. And hopefully we can find, if we don't do the participatory budgeting, we find some kind of role of get input, because it looks like you guys have learned a lot and taught us a lot on this. So to be continued. Anything else?
So we'll put it back on for October, right?
Well, we may have to wait just a little till we get our budgets, because I think it's all tied in with the budgeting. So maybe November, Hitesh?
And the coordinator discussion is a much smaller discussion than an incremental $4 million in actual spending, right? So there might be a way to, increase some resources around coordination of whatever we want additional input to provide, but not really be talking about incremental spending. It's a matter of just prioritizing spending.
Right, or reallocating some funding towards participatory budgeting. I think there's a lot of creative ways to look at our budget so that we could allocate it to, again, the more we pull the public in, the more our checks and balances are in place. And I think this is a means of doing that, to have the public engaged and really studying. And I know one of the components they talked about was actually engaging more with the Finance and Budget Committee to try to make themselves, as well as the public, more aware of the budget and the budgetary process, which I think would be a huge benefit to our city.
Thank you. Well, we had a lot of,
one small housekeeping note is that the presentations from tonight are now up on the website. So sorry we didn't get those up earlier today. It just fell off. So again, Laura's presentation and Daryl King's presentation have been posted. So for reference, for anyone else who's looking for those.
Okay, so we had a lot of really good discussion tonight. Just to recap real quick, CIP, Laura, you're going to kind of isolate the must-haves every year and the other. The parking fund, Hitesh, we're going to find out, kind of come back with what kind of revenue we expect and how much would have to be on geo bonds. The sewer and water rates, I think we've got a pretty good idea there. And the ARPA, thank you. And we will resume participatory budgeting as we do budgeting for the entire city. So thank you.
One
Very
more
good discussions.
thing, Sherry, I'd asked for where we are on CIP spending versus what we've budgeted also.
Okay. CIP spending. And also, Laura, what projects you really think will get done in 25, just because I think that's important to know as far as geo bonds. So.
In that detailed, I think what Leslie referenced as to what we budgeted for, how much has been done, where we're at in spending them.
Yeah, and the one other thing that came up was the library, which we can talk about next time. So that was, it's just sometimes we as the committee see it in the news, and we kind of would like to know ahead of time. So anything you can give us ahead of time would be great. So. Okay, everyone have a good evening. Thank you for your participation and for staying throughout the meeting. So.